Good question. How has the Indonesian side evolved? Let's see. So I don't know anything about the Indonesian culture or what it means to be Indonesian for most of my life. So sometimes I'm asked my dad or my mother, like, where were you born? And then they said something like a place which I didn't know existed, but it was a straight out lie when I was young. So, and I always find it strange because why would my parents lie about where I came from, or where they are coming from? So all that time, I thought I was the only one who knew nothing about my culture, but it was actually a whole generation of people of my age that didn't know about their background. Because of this frustration, I was like, okay, now I want to know. I'm sick of the lies. I'm going to my dad because he's the source. So my energy was like, okay, Dad, here's pen and paper. I want to know everything about you. Where were you born? Who are your siblings? What their names? What is your full name? Tell about your mom and dad. I want to know.
I felt, and it's really weird. I still feel like I always forget my skin color, or like I forget that that I have this Moluccan background or roots, even though I have it, because we grew up in such a wide environment that you really move into that. It's really weird to like say it.
Yeah, the same goes for me also. Like that's when you grow up in this tiny village and you don't see other people that look like you. You just want to adapt to the other people of the other children. You're being confronted with not being white or not being Dutch fully, as people always ask you like, where are you really from? Like, Kassikum is not the right answer then.
I identify myself as Dutch, although the people around me identified me as something different. And I always answered, well, my mother is Indonesian, so I also said I have an Indonesian background.
Then you start to ask questions also like, oh, so where is this? What is this history also? Or where's my family from? And why does one a big part of our family live in one same neighborhood?
I remember that when I was a child and we would go visiting there, I was always thinking like that Moluccan side is really weird and something different and something I don't want to deal like be I don't know have any relationship with because it's so different.
My mom told stories of where we're from, which is Indonesia is a huge country, so it was a lot about Indonesian history, but we're very specifically from West Sumatra, with a culture called the Minangkabau culture, and she told me a lot of mythology from the area, all the tales from the past, so I learned to love the area where we're from a lot because of her stories and her narratives. And especially when I was younger, I think every 2 years, if not sometimes every year, but mostly every 2 years, we would go back and visit family. The first time I think I remembered hearing something or understanding that there's something like colonialism was that my uncle mentioned to me there used to be a lot of Dutch people here, and I thought, me being Dutch as well, I thought like, oh, they were here on holiday as well. I was, you're just a little kid, you didn't understand it. And I just remember him laughing very hard, like, well, you could call it some sort of holiday. They were here. When I went to high school, it was still referred to as the Golden Age. So all colonial history was the Golden Age, right? The Netherlands went abroad, we traded with the rest of the world, yada, yada, yada. But like systems of oppression, system of colonialism, the war, were never mentioned in the textbook. And I just remember being so upset about not reading anything of these things in the books, but just like a very sunny picture.
There was a disclaimer, but it wasn't even a paragraph. So, they were really talking about the growth of the VOC, and how the Netherlands, because of that, how Amsterdam became the way it was. Beautiful, uh, um, all those beautiful houses. It's
I do think it inherently is a lack of understanding and lack of education that has to be better, that acknowledging that it wasn't that only that golden age, that narrative that we traded around, we got spice from there and then we traded them around here. There were also brutal regimes of oppression. There were racial systems put in place that kept people purposely dumb or purposely down.
It did talk a lot about the struggle against the Dutch from the perspective of the Dutch. You know, like there was a lot of talk about Dutch generals and how they fought bravely against the wild people who did not want to be civilized. And yeah, maybe they have been replaced by now. The fact that I was born in Indonesia and only found out like more than half of what I know now about what happened in the colonial times like a year ago is kind of worrying.
I still feel the pain of what my grandparents had been going through, and now also that it's not. When we talked about this before, when the history is not correctly being told at schools, or you don't get to hear about it, then I can still feel a lot of pain and also anger.
In 2020, you had the Black Lives Matter movement, which had an effect on like colonial history here in the Netherlands because of like the discussions with statues and street names.
I think in the last couple of years there has certainly been a sort of turnaround in also the Dutch people's mindsets.
I also started to think more about the decolonial side and also the Eurocentric side of history, and yeah, I think that changed for me.
Indo people as well, to pull them also in the debate of Black Lives Matter. Well, how do you think about your own position in the Dutch East Indies back then? Because you had a good position.
I identify with like the Indo-Dutch community, the Moluccan community, but also like the Indonesian community. So if somebody asks which one of the three are you, I say I'm all three of them. So yeah, for me, like identity is not like a black and or white thing, but you can have multiple identities.
As in our family, it's really like considers themselves Molokkan, sort of with the Molokkan culture. Moluccans were in the KNIL, the Dutch Royal Army.
A lot of them, after 1949, went to the Netherlands thinking that they would at some point earn their independent South Moluccans, but that never existed. And then a lot of them, the big diaspora, ended up here in the Netherlands, and they were put here in very awful circumstances. And for instance, one of my best friends, his mother was born in a former concentration camp because the Moluccan families were put in concentration camps because there wasn't enough place to live.
Yeah, also when you go to these camps, the Moluccan people stay there the longest. They stay there for several decades even. Well, it was originally built as a concentration camp.
One of the things I find difficult when we're discussing these things that happen in this particular time period is the fact that there's a suffering all around. There's suffering in a lot of places, and everybody's story is different. And their narratives matter as well. Their stories matter as well. And even though our ancestors fought on opposite sides, doesn't mean that their suffering is different than our suffering. I don't want their narratives to be lost. The narratives of my great-grandaunt who... the village of my mom was right on a big road, so military would pass by. And the stories that I heard, that she was so afraid of getting raped that she would hide in the bushes or that she would hide in the stories. Even though I wasn't personally there, but you hear these stories from your family and they hit you very hard, and they're incredibly tough to hear. That you come from the people that you were blood related to, but that gave birth to the people you love. So there's still a connection there. I think there's a right reason that blood is thicker than water. Like, it's just such a part of my narrative, even though I wasn't there. Just to hear that women had to be afraid of getting raped and murdered afterwards, children who just got brutally murdered. It's suffering that my family went through, but I know there are stories like this all around the archipelago. The easier route is to look at it black and white, but I think it all forms one big narrative of the country we're all from.